we get started, generally? There's only 3 of us here at this point from the committee, but we're expecting more, but we just never know, so we'll get started. It's 10:02. So I was just maybe asking a quick update from Jesse here in regards to his meeting last week with the Board of Supervisors, where they passed the first ordinance, I guess. Is it the first ordinance? And then, Joel, maybe after he speaks, you could give us an update of what you think the future looks like for us in terms of, you know, how far along are we, and are we almost done?
Excellent. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the board did pass the retail and manufacturing ordinance, sort of effectively ending the commercial ban. And
30 more days.
30 more days. Got it. It comes into effect in 30 days.
The non-coastal part, 30 more days. The
Okay.
coastal part we have to submit to the Coastal Commission, and God knows
Okay.
when that will.
30 days from now or 30 days from the board meeting?
30 days from the board meeting.
Got it. Very good.
Just for fun, I just wanted to double check, Joel, is the intention that once the board takes action on the cultivation ordinance, that we'll have a single resolution submitting both of the ordinances to the Coastal Commission?
Yeah, that's my plan.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I had a note to ask you about that.
And then, you know, any other kind of stuff we want to package to the Coastal Commission. Since I think the other cultivation ordinance will all be non-coastal timber, we don't need to wait for that.
All right.
But, you know, there's like some cleanup stuff that I think we might send with it, if you recall.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Also, the tax passed. That is effective immediately, actually. But, you know, functionally, there won't be anybody up and running to pay those taxes for a while. As far as the kind of where we're going, I'm kind of curious to see how far or how much there is to do on a nursery ordinance, and if we're fairly close to that, just wrapping up the outdoor cultivation and nursery together, and then I think that would be a good stopping point for the working group, or a pause point, kind of regroup after that. I did want to clarify and kind of get the bullet points of the cultivation ordinance again to make sure I have it right. If we can kind of run through that.
Sure.
Timberland cultivation. Yeah, and I didn't make it on this agenda, and there are some other things that I was thinking of that we should probably discuss when it's on the agenda. And at the next meeting, hopefully we'll have a discussion with the building people, and we can formulate some better questions for that. So any place in particular you'd like to start? I did give a report on some of the details that we went over at the last meeting. But I think there's some more specifics to fill in. So do you have an outline you want to follow, or should I just throw out what we have here?
You just want to throw it out, it's fine.
Okay. So the size, I guess, I don't know if we had like a solid consensus on maximum size for outdoor cultivation per parcel. We talked about 2,500 and 5,000 square feet. But I did mention 10,000 square feet, and, you know, in ideal conditions. Or if each case is going to be considered individually, you know, do you want to work the limits a different way? So anyway, we should probably settle on that. Too bad Eric's not here. I know he was lobbying for a little more maximum size allowance.
And being that these all have to, you know, go through the planning commission, I don't really see size even, you know, I think 10,000 is fine. I don't think we're going to see any permitted, but I don't see a reason to really cap it necessarily under 10,000. I think 10,000's, you know, I think this is getting finished up here, and I think almost as, you know, as soon as it's finished, you're going to kind of see that, you know, maybe tweaks have to be made to make it a little bit more accessible. And so I think if we didn't put a ceiling in too low there, then it'd be something we don't have to correct later, or that doesn't need correcting later.
So, Robert, are you talking about three levels, 25, 5, and 10? Or
I think that would be fine, or, you know, even being, you know, I mean, to my opinion, I think even, you know, Vager's, you know, fine, you know, just pulling the packet for the retail, you know, operation for the conditional use permit, you know, you can start to see that, you know, you're really up to proving your case to a board that's, you know, it's a pretty detailed little package, you know, that everybody's going to have to submit. So I think only someone in the most idyllic situations even going to, you know, going to begin to contemplate 10,000 square feet. And I don't really see, you know, it seems kind of arbitrary to put it at 5. Really.
Okay, yeah, I know the original impetus for limiting it was sort of to control the scale and the type and the, you know, preventing bubbles and things like that. And where the bubble blew up and popped really fast in the business, in this industry, so that's a lot less of a concern. And now that we have one ordinance, you know, passed for commercial business, it's almost time to sort of lean the other way and invite business, because there's been a lot of discouragement in the business at all levels, and there's less and less interest in participating in it, I think, industry-wide. So
We haven't really talked about it, but are we not even considering indoor in Timberland? Or is this specifically only an outdoor permit?
well, I think we talked about it. I mean, yeah, we were leaving that out for simplicity's sake. If there's enough understood about it that it doesn't complicate things, then I suppose it'd be fine.
And I think, I mean, under the definition that we've introduced to the board, I think you'd be able to use up to 5 watts per square foot or whatever,
Sure.
but no more than that.
Right.
what?
5 watts?
6
watts.
is the
6?
state tier. Yeah, in term for being productive outside, that's sufficient.
Well, if, the only reason I bring it up is that I think that, you know, 10,000 square foot of outdoor, I think is going to be different to people than 10,000 square foot of indoor, as far as just the amount being produced and the intensity of the operation.
Sure.
So if we're really just talking about outdoor,
Yeah.
I think we can make kind of the case to the world that 10,000 square feet is fairly equivalent to the 5,000 square feet that we allowed in manufacturing zones.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, 5,000 square feet of indoors is probably equivalent to more like 20,000 square feet of outdoor in terms of production in a year.
How about in
Or
terms
more.
of the intensity of like, you know, how many employees you're going to need? How much water you're going to need?
On a 10,000 outdoor.
Right. Yeah, those are the things that start to make it more of an issue. That's why it is appealing to stick with the smaller tiers, just because calculating those things is hard. Like we talked about, the ways that people farm varies really widely. If everybody, you know, planning commission and the board, you know, had a really wide understanding of how things work, then they could probably make good calls about those things, given you know, an operation plan in front of them. But if you don't understand it, then it's difficult to tell what the truth is about what you're actually doing, how much water you need, how many people you need, you know. So yeah, a 10,000 square foot operation could be way less intensively run and use way less people and less water than its neighboring 2,500 square foot operation that's running more intensively, using different varieties, different kinds of soil. It's just such a wide range of how you can, farming practices vary so widely, that it'd be nice to have that flexibility. But if the case is that, the people who are making the decisions aren't equipped with the ability to make those distinctions, then it may be easier to just artificially limit it by size. And I think that was that and economics for bubbles and such, I think, were the two best reasons that we had in the very beginning. And the first one still remains, so.
Did you still want to do kind of 2 tiers based on the pavement of the road?
I think so. I think 2,500 I think should be the max when we're talking about our off-grid gravel road areas. We weren't specifying the grid, but because I think there was some reasons for why that was. I don't remember why we weren't specifying on-grid, off-grid, but I think for dirt roads, I think starting at 2,500 square feet for the first year is easy to justify. I think some of the more ideal spots, though, that might have a chance of actually setting up for the long term, employing people that are accessed on the pavement, have either ability to produce clean power on site or grid access, plenty of water, then those spots probably shouldn't be limited, because we've already missed the whole temporary licensing window, unfortunately. It looked like CDFA was going to keep doing temporary licenses for everybody for a while, but what they did is they're only renewing temporary licenses. So you had to have had a temporary license in the first wave in order to get a temporary license again. And so that only applies to the municipalities that were first in on that.
When you're talking about allowing a larger grow because it's on the grid or on paved roads, doesn't that also mean it's closer to neighbors, or that the smell is more likely to be a factor?
Not in timberland parcels that are suitable, I don't think. The timberland parcels that are not in residential land use areas that are on the grid, I think there's, maybe 10 of them, I don't know, that I know of. There's not very many.
And these are mostly along the highway?
Yeah, they're like 20-acre parcels that are out past Gasky along 199. That's where I'm familiar with it. Where else? There may be a few out South Fork. There are a couple parcels out there that are probably suitable. Where else? No, there's no grid out there though. Pavement, but no grid. Where else is there grid in timberland? Our timberland grid infrastructure is pretty weak here. So, yeah. So it's pretty limited. Yeah. But anyway, the idea of it already being difficult to be in the regulated market because of the fact that we missed the temporary licensing window, I think serves to argue that promoting opportunities for farms that really do have a chance going forward from here, that to set up infrastructure, and be large enough to be able to employ people, that should definitely be nurtured. Otherwise, we're not really going to have anything. We kind of missed the window for the small farmers who needed to be in the market sooner in order to be able to stay in the market.
And you say missed the temporary option the first time, which means that you're disqualified on temporary forever?
Yeah, I believe so. I could be wrong, but that's my reading
Okay.
of the new rules. So anyway, I just think that's a part of it. Things are changing so rapidly that I think it makes sense to
Okay. I'd like to maybe invite public, if there's any comments in regards to what we're talking about currently is the forestry version of out in the timber zones. With what else on that? Just what's on the table right now is 3 options: a 2,500 square foot plan, 5,000, and a 10,000. If you guys have comments to that, now would be a time. If not, you can sit and wait. Come on up, please.
Councilman Aubrey with Yurok Tribe. Basically, we just wanted a moratorium on our ancestral lands until we meet with the county board. And we're not against cannabis industry. We just want to be a part of the process.
And so I believe that you have been, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you're just kind of restating your
Yes.
original position, and I want to say that I think we've already got that message.
Okay.
And we're doing our best to honor it.
Thank you.
I have a little bit of new information on that.
Okay.
The ordinance that we sent forward, I asked the Board of Supervisors if they wanted to wait and sort out the issues relating to the tribes, and they said, nope, we'll keep moving, but we'll come back to it. And so we have a placeholder language in there that basically says nobody can apply for a permit within the tribal boundary without the tribe's consent. But then Ellie Hoops has sent us basically Humboldt's moratorium language. And since this won't go into effect for 30 days from the board meeting, that moratorium probably should go into effect, or we should bring it to the board, and I will bring it to the board, probably the first meeting in January, since nobody can possibly get a permit that soon anyway. That'll give 45 days, which I think because Ellie and I have been talking about this, I think that's long enough to figure out a plan. So that's where I think this is going to go.
Okay, thank you.
I'd just like to say real quick, so the tribal boundaries are clear, easy for everyone to see. The ancestral land areas are not so easy for everyone to see. And so however that gets worked out isn't clear to me. It's government to government discussions. But just what applicants, I think, can do, people who are considering applying for permits in timberland, can just on their own, consider that this is going to be an issue, that tribal ancestral lands that aren't mapped could be where you're trying to set up, and to just be aware of that and do whatever you can to figure out how to work with the tribe to make it work.
Heidi, as far as the retail and manufacturing ordinance, how much of Klamath is outside the coastal zone and outside the tribal boundary at the same time? It's not a lot, right? Like Hunter Creek, that's going to be in the coastal zone, right?
No, Hunter Creek's not in the coastal zone, but it also doesn't have any commercial, so to speak. If we're talking about the retail sales. I mean, you'd have the area by maybe the Trees of Mystery, but I think that's commercial recreation, which wasn't one of the zones that we selected. I don't think there are going to be very many opportunities in Klamath.
Okay, so it probably isn't going to be an issue until the actual cultivation ordinance.
Well, we have the Glen. Forgot about the Glen.
But that's within the tribal boundary, right?
Oh, that is.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah, there should, I don't see there being a lot of sticky issues, except because it was what? It's Ag General Hunter Creek area?
Hunter Creek, it's a combination. Yeah, it's mostly residential R1 and, and agriculture.
Okay. Okay, so we'll probably bring a moratorium forward in January, and I don't see this being a huge issue.
So just to wrap up the numbers and the bulk of the report to the board from 2 weeks ago. So yeah, it sounds like for size, 2,500, like we said, for unpaved, up to 10,000 for pavement. That works for the working group.
Heidi, that's going to put planning basically in the position of figuring out if somebody who's proposing a 10,000 square foot grow has sufficient water. You know, are you more comfortable capping that at 5,000? Does it matter to you? Is that kind of a gray area where you're worried that staff's not going to kind of accurately estimate or be able to hold people accountable for the amount of water they're saying they're going to use?
At this point, I'm unsure. I'd have to check with our environmental health specialist to find out how they feel about it. It brings up a really good point, though. I mean, that does cause me concern as far as, you know, our ability to be able to, you know with some certainty that the quantity is reasonable and viable.
I think that's the biggest
I'd like to maybe just weigh in, and I'm glad you asked the question, Joel, and I guess this is just me from a farmer's point of view, and understanding all my friends in Humboldt that badmouth the growing on the hills and what's happened down there and degrading the waterways and all that. It's going to be hard for us to say put numbers to, you know, I'm just here thinking, you know, a 5,000 square foot plot and a 10,000 square foot plot under different managements could easily use the same amount of water or vice versa, and so it's hard to really regulate that and ask that, and so I think we got to just go back to, you know, kind of good farming practices and what is the method of the water delivery, what is the system, you know, are you surface water, well water, whatever, and regulate it from that standpoint that it's meeting, you know, water quality standards and those things. But it's not about quantity, it's about the system, maybe. Because quantity, you can talk about, you know, numbers all day, and I wouldn't ever believe them.
Yeah, that's how the water board kind of focuses on it. They're not as concerned with number, quantity, although they do have some acre feet maximum. It gets pretty huge, but
I just don't want to put staff in a position where somebody is saying, yeah, we're going to, you know, use trucked in water, and
I don't think the state even allows for that as a means.
I think they do. I looked at it.
As a regular means.
I didn't see any cap. You just have to basically say who you're licensed
That must have been Humboldt ordinance I read that doesn't allow it.
Well, you know, if we're saying you can't use surface water diversions and they're next to a creek and they're saying, oh yeah, we're going to truck it in, you know, we need to kind of test the viability. Are they really going to truck it in? Like, can they, is that financially viable, or are they going to start diverting from the stream the second we permit this thing? That's
the thing with the water board. You know, at 10,000 feet, your permit gets more complicated. There's more monitoring requirements and yada yada, but it doesn't carry any extra enforcement other than whatever they're willing to spend on it. You know, so whatever you state for your water source, it's, you know, it's on your honor on a day-to-day basis. They want to get into metering and things like that, but even those things aren't monitored on a day-to-day basis anyway. So, yeah, again, it adds complication, extends the conversation, makes it all take longer. That's why I wanted to just stop at 2,500 in all cases, you know, and there was some people lobbying for, well, let's go to 5,000.
Well, I mean, we might be in a situation where, you know, staff isn't going to recommend a yes vote to the planning commission on anything over 2,500 because they're not satisfied with the water resources that the person is proposing.
Right.
I just wanted to make sure that Heidi's okay putting staff in a position to have to make that call, because it's
no, Heidi's not excited about that at all, actually. I'm feeling like 2,500 sounding really good at this point.
Yeah, I'd like to just, like, while Eric's not here, let's just cap it at 2,500.
Oh, I think we have consensus?
What do you think, Kurt? Kurt's not weighing in.
Kurt's repping.
Okay, well, we've been at 25 and 5,000 a long time. Maybe not mess with that, since we did have consensus.
And cap it at 5,000?
Yeah, only when you have pavement.
So 5 also requires pavement?
I think so.
Okay.
Were you nodding yes on that, guys?
We weren't saying grid for some reason, and I forget why now.
You guys can nod. I'm not going to nod. I don't agree with that. Yeah.
Okay. You want to defend that, please, Kurt?
We don't have time for that.
So we're talking about now, because I'm kind of right in the middle of what we were, I just walked in there. We're talking about like outdoor growing, right, in timberland?
Yes.
And we're talking about square footage and caps. And I know we came away the other day from our last conversation and we were around like 10,000 as a top end number with things like pavement, right, and access. And so it sounds like the number just got cut in half. Sounds like. Okay. Well, I was advocating for way more than 10,000, so, you know, now my end of it's coming down way far, right, to 25 and 5, so I was thinking more like 10 and 5.
Yeah, I did, that's
you know,
what I
but-
started out by saying, is that at the last meeting, 10,000 came up, and we were going that direction, given certain qualifications. And so that's what we were getting into, and so now we're talking about, well, you know, one of the arguments for not doing that was for simplicity, for, you know, to get a time frame, you know. So we're already extending the discussion here, you know, by doing it, taking longer. But
The downside to making it larger is that it gets more complex. And what that really might ultimately just mean is that a applicant has to spend more time and energy working with staff, either to convince them that it's viable, to educate them, show more kind of proof of what they're going to do. It might not be a bad thing, and it's not a guarantee that anybody's getting a 10,000 square foot permit. It's just, you know, that's now asking for more and more staff resources, and it's hard to charge for, well, I guess they could charge for hours maybe, Heidi, I don't know.
I think it needs to be kept at least 10,000 square feet, because we can see, I'm evidence of how slow the community can work, you know? It could end our business. I mean, literally, if I pay a lease for 6 months too long without a license, I'm done. In fact, I've considered just selling the lease if anybody's interested. And moving on in life and enjoying my kids and stuff. And so 10,000 square feet is going to allow a 2,500 square foot farmer who is going to start out with 2,500 square feet to plan his farm out and not wait for the county to catch up with industry. You know, we should have been on this, you know, there was a medical industry for 20 years now. And our community has been starving for 20 years now. So, and as soon as we're done with this, we need to start shaking loose the other ordinances so that we can provide some sort of, no, we're not going to get the margins the industry used to provide, and we don't care, we just want a few jobs. You know? And I don't think we're going to get jobs with this, but arbitrarily cutting numbers in half is just getting arbitrary. And yes, we want the 2,500 square foot farmer to know that he's going to grow into a 10,000 square foot farmer. He's going to provide 4 times the jobs, whatever the one job you had on the 2,500 square foot, you know.
let's just find a way to change the rules as we go, like make up the rules as we go.
It's a very slow process.
Let me attempt to summarize, and then please correct me, because I'm really shooting in the dark here. And personally, I think, in judging all the conversation in the last 2 or 3, 4 meetings that I've been at, and what you guys just said, I guess I'm okay with the 25, the 5, and the 10, because of the understanding that as you get into the 10, there's so much more required that now potentially it's not, you know, the county may have a veto pin, or somebody's going to be able to more closely regulate that with the concerns that we that would vote today to go lower have, right? So if what our role here is to provide a overall arching structure or template for 3 different levels. It doesn't mean it's going to fly, right? But we're going to condone it and okay it at this level, right? That's what we're doing. That's our job.
Yeah, I think so.
So you see it? It kind of makes everybody happy. We could like agree to this and move on. Generally,
give planning the power to decide what is right and what isn't.
because there's more requirements as you get larger.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, Heidi, do you have,
Would that be
Any
wrong
last-
of us to punt kind of on that deal, or do you want us to work through it more?
No, I think that, you know, if the working group is saying that 10,000 square feet is an appropriate number of feet, and we're going to have the kind of regulatory controls, it just becomes kind of up to Heidi whether or not she feels like she can utilize those controls with, you know, the current staff resources. And if not, then just don't. Just, I guess, just, are you comfortable telling people no? The ordinance may say up to 10,000, but we just don't feel we're in a position to permit 10,000 right now. Are those kind of discretionary issues you want responsibility for, I guess?
Maybe, Heidi, I'll give you a minute to think, and let me add on.
Well, it's a lot of responsibility here. I mean, I think there's more that I need to understand before I can say yay or nay on that.
We need a template for planning, and this may be, I don't know if it needs to be done with the working group, or maybe it's just done with some members, you know, some farmers, but just to understand the different farming styles. And that'll be part of your plan that you submit to the state. It's pretty detailed. And so just understanding the difference between running multiple crops a year and farmers that run a single crop in a year. The difference between, you know, 1,000 plants and 50 plants, you know, or maybe how they're similar depending on the size. So it doesn't, it sounds complicated and mysterious, you know, at first, but it isn't. We could lay it out kind of in a chart format so that it makes a little more sense. You know, a 10,000 square foot farm that's growing single season plants, you know, you could fill that up with 100 large plants that are, you know, just grown one plant, like an annual plant that's harvested once at the end of the season. And that's a very low intensive style of farming that uses little water compared to light deprivation techniques where you may use thousands of plants in that same space, where you're loading up garden beds 2, 3, or 4 times a year, harvesting 2 or 3, 4 times a year, and using, you know, much larger quantity of water and labor and impact. But not necessarily. You could grow like that and, you know, use not that much more water, but definitely, you know, the more output you're getting, you know, the more whatever pounds per area of space, generally the more water you're going to be using.
Okay, well then I think that we move forward. I'm thinking rather than tiers, it might be easier to just say up to 10,000, and then if you want to do 7,500, if that's what's right for your property, you can then stack a 5,000 and a 2,500 or something like that from the state. It's your expense.
And there's different types of licenses too. The outdoor and the light deprivation license they are a different style, and the outdoor, the small outdoor, it's the cottage outdoor, the smallest one, you can pick between 2,500 square feet of plants. And so whatever the number, any number of plants that you can, you know, fit in a confined 2,500 square foot area, or, you know, it can be 500 square foot areas, or you can do 25 individual plants with no space limit. So that is important to understand. You could spread that out over an entire acre if you were so inclined.
Do we want that?
I don't know.
I don't
I mean,
either.
it would be weird to spread it out hugely, you know, but if there's another one, the next one is 5,000 or 50 plants. And they have to be on non-contiguous plots, but they don't specify a space. So, you know, the plant could occupy a space that's 200 square feet, say, you know, 15 feet by 15 feet. And then you could want maybe 15 or 20 feet all around each individual plant. I haven't done a grid map to see what that looks like with 50 plants, but that could be pretty big.
But that's from the state, right? You're going to get that license from the state. We don't
from the
as a
state.
county, we don't necessarily have to have that type of licensing on the county level. The county level can still be based upon the total square footage. You get your state license for X amount of plants, and you apply for a county license for X amount of feet, and your plants are still going to have to be confined, whether it's non-contiguous or contiguous, in that many feet.
That's
right, on the county
definitely
level.
easier for us to just say,
It's bad for the farmer, especially for the low impact farmer who's trying to do it with very little help, very little employees, and a small amount of water. You know, really the light on the land farmer is going to grow just like that. They're going to grow one large plant in a really large garden bed and give it as much space all around it as they can. And that's the lowest intensity type of farm. That's why that permit is the cheapest. If they recognize that when you're pulling a tarp, whether you're using a light or not, when you're pulling a tarp, you're licensed, pulling a tarp meaning you're taking a piece of plastic and you're covering your plants every day for a few hours to control the photo period. Your license goes up in price a bunch when you do that. Not for space, but just because you can get multiple crops. And so they were recognizing that the farmer who's doing one crop a year needs a little bit of a break on their licensing costs. And so there needs to be a mechanism to allow that. But our square foot tax is hard on that one, I guess. Unless it just goes with the state, you know, it's 5,000 or 50 plants. You'd get taxed on the 5,000 even if the plants were, you know. I mean, if you had individual garden beds either way, you're allowed to measure the individual plots and then add them up, and you don't have to account for the space between. So you could just work it the same way, I suppose, and you'd just be limiting the size of the plants, I suppose. So anyway, getting off of the weeds on there. Let me just run through these. Should I just run through these numbers real quick that I gave to the board? We had not considering parcel size as minimums, just relying on the setbacks. Is that right, Joel?
That's what we talked about, but is there some sort of absolute minimum parcel size? Is it 5? Is it, are we really talking about a
I'd be fine.
The setbacks just really, you know, inhibit everything.
5 would be fine, but I do know of a 4-acre parcel that really would be nice. There's plenty of water.
All right, well, yeah, that's fine with me. Well, what are the setbacks?
We had 1,000 feet from residential zone and land uses.
Residence or residential?
Residential zones
Okay.
and land use designations. National parks and state parks also 1,000 feet. 200 feet from the state highways. That one and the water stuff was something that the board, Chris had mentioned, wanted to make sure was part of the county code, the surface water discussion. We talked about having that not included, even though the state does allow for it in the plan. You wanted to have us talk about that.
Yeah, the indoor that they just introduced says no surface water diversions in it, and
Yeah.
you know, I was thinking we would just keep that.
Sure. And then the 200-foot setback, and I just explained to him that it doesn't necessarily it doesn't mean that you're obliged to allow them at 200 feet. It's just a minimum starting point, and then it has to, you know, go through this process of approval. I think they're sort of warming up to the idea of taking responsibility for making decisions on details like that and not putting it on the working group to find the magic number that fits everyone all the time. So yeah, we had 200 feet from the state highways and then 50 feet for everything else. So that'd be neighboring parcels of like zoning, national forests that's not park, yeah, and any other property lines. That'd be county road lines as well. I guess that would apply to, not state highways. And let's see, we talked about, that was it for numbers, I think.
And then we talked about a 1-to-1 ratio for, what'd you call it, vegetative space, or?
Oh, right, that's correct. I didn't mention that in the report, but yeah, I think that's appropriate, not to exceed that.
So it's vegetative versus what? Reproductive?
Flowering.
Flowering.
Yeah.
And right now, in terms of size, we would say 25, 5, and 10, or 25 up to 10, or what?
Just up to 10.
Up to 10, no 25.
Yeah, I don't need to say it, just anything
up
up
to-
to
up to
10, that
10.
includes anything
Okay.
under that as well. If somebody wanted to just do 1,000 feet, that's all they had room for, they have to buy a license from the state for 2,500 square feet.
But
So-
we're saying a maximum of 25 if you're on an
Oh,
unpaved
yes,
road.
I think, yeah, we're capping it at 25, correct, thanks for
There you go.
reminding us. for county-maintained unpaved road access.
Okay. So comments on the summary that Jesse just gave. That's sounded correct, right? No changes?
And then as far as the indoor, I don't know if it answers your question about indoor on timberland. I don't think it's fine if you're on the grid, because we had that qualification anyway for indoor, don't we, in your ordinance?
I don't remember. I mean, we didn't allow it anywhere that wasn't on the grid.
Yeah, so I think that would be fine. I think we didn't include timberland zoning at all in the indoor. Well, that one's already done with, so. And I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, we can amend the things that we've just passed.
Sure.
It's not-
Yeah, I would see no problem with, you know, timberland on the grid as long as it's, you know, compatible with the general plan to build a building to do it, as far as development goes on timberland. But, you know, if it's like an accessory structure to a residence or something, I suppose that would be fine, right? You probably couldn't just build I don't know. That was something else, I guess, that might be for later discussion, but commercial development of timberland with buildings, you know, like how much before it starts to get inconsistent with development in timberland, you know. When you're building buildings that are just for cannabis and they're not for timberland uses, you know, you're not building sawmill buildings or whatever, so I don't know. That's important to talk about now.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how that determination is made, or if it's even made by us or CAL FIRE or what. I don't know if Heidi can say. At what point is a use no longer consistent with the commercial cultivation of timber? Because that's a requirement in the general plan. If you're going to use timberland for anything with a use permit, it's got to not interfere with the use for harvest.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps having some type of a report prepared by a forester, something that would, you know, state whether or not any of those structures would inhibit the growing of timber.
Perfect.
Now, you have to have an actual plan from a forester for TPZ. You don't have to have anything like that for AF, do you?
No, no, you don't.
Is there any value to making people do that? Or is that getting a little bit
Potentially.
oppressive?
Only for the forester.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
I'm definitely for that. I had a forester at our place and CAL FIRE, and I got a lot of good information from both of them, and it wasn't expensive. Everybody should do it.
I second that.
Yeah, no, it is good for the forester. It's good for that industry. It's good for knowledge and information. Yeah, I think that's good. It's not a burdensome requirement. Helps for the image of protecting our resources.
Yeah, we've got a line in the kind of general requirements that says biological assessment, wetland delineation, and we can just add, and you know, forester's report or timber management plan or whatever the best language is.
Forester consult, something like that.
Something like that. We can just throw it in there.
Yeah, that's part of the water board permits anyway.
Okay.
So they're going to be there anyhow.
We couldn't call cannabis agriculture, let's just call it timber. No?
Yes, it is. It's big.
Trees you
Stocks.
smoke.
You don't have to smoke them. Okay. We talked about on-site sewage disposal requirements or not, and then there was an idea that that just already is in the code. It's like already covered. I'm not
redundant.
sure. It's redundant. Okay. While we're on this, I'd like to add some things to talk about maybe later, since we actually don't have timberland on the agenda.
It's been on the agenda.
It's been on the agenda, but
Well,
nurseries and hemp.
let's not go there.
I wanted to get it for next time, that
Sure.
things that we forgot that I thought of, say,
Yeah.
so fire access, maybe CAL FIRE should weigh in specifically in the ordinance, or fire access when you're having businesses operating in timberland. There's the CAL FIRE code regulations, the county codes. County has the fire safe regulation thing.
Heidi, can you think of anything in the fire safe regulations that would apply to these?
Well, yeah, I mean, we do have a number of regulations related to turnarounds and turnouts and widths of road, vegetative clearance, all of those things that are included. But, we could potentially, have someone from CAL FIRE directly involved.
Do you think most of these kind of dirt private roads are going to comply with fire safe regulations?
Well, I think our roads do, but the driveways, accessing them, not necessarily.
Yeah, I've studied them, and the reason why I brought it up was because that I need some more definitions, and I don't know where to find them. And so we have roads and we have driveways, and in the county code, I don't see a definition for driveways. It talks all about roads, and then the CAL FIRE, which is part of the county code thing now, talks about driveways, and they have a way less standard. They don't take into account radius. They can be narrower. They can be 10 feet. I think they still have a slope requirement, but anyway, they're much lower standards than roads, and so we need a definition. And then also the consideration is it a driveway still when it's for a commercial use? I've had some conflicting information from planning about that, what that means when you have a commercial use. Is driveway standard suitable, or does it become a commercial road? And so that's where I thought CAL FIRE and fire department should weigh in on that. And it is an issue, because if we're going to require people to build roads in timberland where we're not supposed to be developing, it's really expensive for the applicant, and it might result in overdevelopment in the timberland. When I had a CAL FIRE out at my place, my driveway crosses parcels, so it needs to be a road technically per the county. And so the standards for that were way beyond what CAL FIRE wanted. He came through and he said, well, it's supposed to be 20 feet here. I'm saying, he's like, well, there's no way, you can't. You'd have to, how would you do that? I'd be like, well, I'd have to cut into the mountain. He's like, I don't want to see you cutting into the mountain just for that. How about just put a turnaround right here, But like none of that's accommodated without like going through the whole variance process with the board, which is like a big deal. So that just definitely needs to be figured out, I think. Otherwise, it's just going to leave people in these impossible situations where they could never get a permit because of the road, even though CAL FIRE is saying it's fine.
Well, I can, and I don't know specifically for timberland, but I would say that generally speaking, there's countless businesses in this county that operate what one would consider as the driveway standard. Sure. For their access on their property for their commercial business, which is already permitted by the county.
Existing, yeah, so they can get away with it.
Or brand new businesses that just started the same way. I mean, there's countless access points that are for commercial businesses that are driveway standards, quote unquote. And then I don't know what those standards exactly are, but I mean, they're dirt, gravel, and they're not.
It like comes in when you do a new construction, a new building is when you get hit with the modern requirements.
Can you give us some examples?
Well, I was thinking about several different businesses down Moorhead Road. I mean, I think of a couple different ones in Klamath, but I mean, there's
tons of parking lots around the county that don't meet the 20-foot stall requirement.
For example, every single piece of farmland in Smith River is used for commercial purposes. And they're all dirt access to the parcels.
Yeah, I can think of some businesses off of like Parkway. There's a little nursery back there, and it's a road now because it accesses multiple parcels in a business, but it isn't 20 feet wide and it's not paved, which is the standard for commercial.
Some of these things may or may not be permitted.
Sure, that's the case too. So that's the thing is when it comes to the cannabis, like it's going to have to you know, every I will have to be dotted, every T crossed, you know, and then it of course makes it impossible. You know, that's what counties have done this that are trying to integrate large numbers of existing farms. You know, started a while ago and created, you know, a pathway, a grace period type of pathway to allow people to operate while they're figuring all these things out that they've never had to address for years and years. But because we don't have a lot of that to deal with, we didn't deal with it. But I think now we do have to deal with it because we're going to move forward with an ordinance and have a complete industry. You know, it would take years really to develop timberland properties to like all the existing commercial standards. So I don't know, that might be an impossible task. Should be on the list of things to talk about fire.
I'm just sitting here thinking you're getting in the weeds at our weed meeting here.
I know. Just want to be done. Do something else.
Are we ready to,
nurseries?
like, just generally come to consensus on all those tenets and points that we've gone over on this timber piece? Sure.
Good for now.
Joel, do you feel that you've got them all recorded correctly? Do you want me to run through it?
I think I got it. I think, you know, I can start the process, and Heidi and I will talk about fire safe regulations later. That sounds like a really fun conversation.
Yeah, we have a good contact at CAL FIRE that we could, you know, bring to the table.
Yeah,
okay. Any final comment out in the public? Everybody okay moving on with this, consensus-wise? Yep.
Nurseries?
Yes.
Talk about nurseries?
Yeah, so, yeah, nurseries and hemp are the two, and then you'd also mentioned something about the building people that you wanted to bring.
Oh, yeah, we're going to have that hopefully next meeting, and we can come up with some questions. That was sort of back to timberland again.
Okay.
If we're getting burned on that, we want to move on with the agenda items we can. If we have time, we come back to the building questions. That's all right, jumping around like that.
Nurseries. How are you going to tax nurseries? Are we going to tax nurseries? Are they going to be cultivation? Fits in the definition of cultivation. So, the state definition, cultivation means any activity involving the planting, growing, harvesting, drying, curing, grading, or trimming of cannabis. So you could say that nurseries fall under that.
I don't think it falls in the definition of cultivation area, though, because it's not flowering, and therefore I don't think our tax covers it. Like, I don't think we can tax it.
Got it.
So I mean...
And then, obviously, the definition of a nursery is not, it can't be a greenhouse that somebody calls a nursery and then lets plants flower and harvest, right?
So there's a,
No, that's not allowed by the state.
So that, the way our existing tax structure that just got voted on is set up, I hear how you're saying that you wouldn't tax it that way, but we got to also consider, like, the double taxation of the same product, right? Because, for example, you're not taxing all of the commercial growers who are flowering, and they have, you know, they can have X amount of vegetative space to keep their production going, and that vegetative space doesn't get taxed. And so a nursery is essentially just that vegetative space those plants are then going out to be flowered somewhere else. And so you would probably want to think about, you know, how maybe it's just the license itself is a different price structure for the license, right, to try to cover X costs. Because again, those plants are getting taxed whether they're locally or outside the county. There could be like an export tax possibly if you're talking about selling stuff out of the county, maybe, you know, because if it's sold within the county, the county's going to gather the tax revenue from that grower that it gets sold to locally.
Yeah, just let it be a good job producer. People are going to be, who are running nurseries, going to spend a lot of money. They're going to pay a lot of property taxes on the buildings they build.
And is there a limit to size at all, or?
Not by the state.
We can do whatever we want, but yeah,
not limited by the state.
There certainly could be or can be.
For timberland nurseries, I think they should be the same limitations that we talked about for farming, you know. So it would be ×2. If you had a 2,500 square foot limit, you'd be allowed 5,000 square foot nursery.
Do you need more space to be viable for a nursery? Is a 2,500 square foot nursery gonna
Oh, if that's your market, if you're just if you're just yourself, I mean, yeah, it depends on how many people you're trying to employ. If you're just trying to create your own job, definitely.
I would go so far as to say a nursery is probably one of the industries that could work at even lesser square footage than flowering facilities can, because your costs are going to be much less in a nursery versus a commercial production facility of flowering cannabis. And so you probably could be viable at even smaller sizes than what we're trying to put in under.
It'd be tough. I mean, the yield the dollar per foot of plants is a lot less, but you need a lot less space. So I haven't done that.
The intensity of what you're trying to do is different. You know, you're just growing a plant for a short period of time and passing it on. It's something in a small facility that one person could handle without much problem, you know, in a very small capacity. But
is this specifically an indoor operation? Full lights, or is this?
No, it's almost opposite.
Almost entirely, it's going to be a non-indoor operation.
In the winter, it's going to be more inside.
In as much as it will require lights and most likely be in some type of covering, it won't fit the definition of what the light intensity and whatnot of an indoor
My little
state level
nursery
operation.
runs year round in a polycarbonate greenhouse, translucent material, with less than 6 watts per foot for light supplementing during the dark, during the winter
So
months.
is there any geographic limitation at all?
No, I don't think so. It's ideal on the coast where it's cooler, you're not fighting the heat, but it's doable anywhere. It's one of the biggest nurseries in Willow Creek. Hot. So, and then there's good operations on the coast because you can do greenhouses and it doesn't cost so much to cool them.
And nurseries in our current ag zones out in Smith River and whatnot, is that a viable option? Is that allowed under our current laws and rules?
On ag general. Right.
Well, nothing cannabis is allowed under our current rules.
Okay.
Prime ag, no, but the ag general.
In prime ag, yeah.
Or I guess no, it says
So
buildings,
coastal
so-
zone kicks it out.
Yeah. You need
today's
buildings,
rules.
so prime ag wouldn't work.
So, but if we made it the same kind of existing structure requirement as the indoor cultivation.
Sure.
And allowed it anywhere you want to do it, it sounds like it's viable anywhere. What are the limiting factors? What needs to happen to protect the community? If it's not really going to smell,
Oh, right.
you know,
Well, a little
it
bit of
could-
light,
Yeah, you have to be able to keep either in a place where the light emitting, but if we're not allowing light emission at all, that does get tough for a nursery makes it expensive for a nursery to have to block light emissions at night.
I've been meaning to ask about that because
low
if you don't
level.
allow light emission at all under any levels, we're basically running a lot of these businesses out of this county,
It's like
period.
porch light. Mine looks like a porch light from
Because
100
most
feet
of these
away.
facilities, whether they're indoor, outdoor, whatever, these permits that we're trying to do, they're going to be running their vegetative space and they're going to be running very low-level lights. And so my thought was that there should be a framework of hours that is like 18 or 19 hours a day where it's okay to allow light emissions under a certain spectrum of square footage, wattages and square footages, because otherwise people aren't going to put themselves into business in a lot of scenarios because it's too
Yeah.
expensive.
Yeah, you can't. Right. You can't mechanically black out a nursery all year round. It would the facility would be pretty expensive.
So what Kurt just mentioned, it makes sense somewhat. You could limit light from 10 o'clock at night until 4 in the morning or something, right? Is that what you're?
Yeah.
Something in that range?
Yeah. Mine are off from 11 to 5, but some
These plants require 18 or more hours of day length to keep them out of flowering production. So all these places we're talking about where we're talking about a flowering space and then the vegetative space on all these potential business licenses, those vegetative spaces potentially in a lot of times of the year are going to need some type of low-level light applications on them, which
Sometimes
is
they
going
need
to...
it all night, though. You can't say that. Some varieties will start to flower even with 18 hours of light, so you need 24 hours.
Yeah, and so
I'm having
then,
a problem right now, actually.
you know, you're under the ballgame of, so at what point do you want to allow that? Is it like a 24-hour access to this low-level light that can be emitted, or is it an 18-hour access only, or is it a special permitting that needs to happen, or?
It's
Because a
not-
lot of facilities will have inability, and you'll have no reason to
Yeah.
totally black them out, you know, like that. It's
The light
kind of-
levels are low enough, it's no more than like when somebody's burning a 400-watt metal halide in front of the barn.
When you
With
say
no re-
low level, that's what I was wondering. Low level is not like obtrusive from 101 looking down in the valley of Smith River.
So like, you know, I don't know the exact specifications, but I know the state makes these mandates on what's indoor and what's outdoor, and we've talked about not letting light out specifically with indoor, and we're probably going down that route with non-indoor, you know, state permits. But the state has a wattage effect per square foot.
We're
and so-
stopping at 6 watts per foot.
Yeah, and so at that level, so when you have a more intensity per square foot over that, then, you know, no emission of light. Maybe
Yeah.
it's under that level is where you allow emission of light during certain hours, because the state already puts kind of a
Yeah.
fine line on what is and what isn't indoor light use.
If that's doable, then that, I think, could be a good solution.
The Coastal Commission has pretty specifically told us no light pollution. So while that would work outside the coastal zone, I would think we would need some sort of rule about light pollution
Yeah.
in the coastal zone.
Probably just can't do it in the coastal zone, it's not gonna work.
I guess one of the questions would be, what is considered light pollution? Because, like I said, if there's a certain level at which you determine that this isn't light pollution, then it's underneath that. You know, for example, I don't remember where the prison is, but if it's in the coastal zone or not. I don't think it's in the
They're
coastal
exempt,
zone.
aren't they?
Yeah, it's the other side of Lake Earl Drive.
It's the other side, right? Yeah. I mean, that's an extensive amount of light pollution, right?
Well, that pollutes my place all the way up on the mountain.
You know, I've been operating it, I work at a nursery that operates and had emitted under the light threshold that we're talking about for indoor, but for years had emitted a significant amount of light during certain periods of the year in the coastal zone and had no issue at all. We don't use lights anymore for most of the things that are produced at the nursery I work at, but,
Do they have a definition for it, the coastal, when they say no light pollution, do they have it, like what that means?
No, but they have kind of things, like even like porch lights and things, they want to make sure that we require them be directed downward, you know?
Right.
Like they're pretty interested in keeping dark places dark.
Sure.
Now, if we were actual, like, pure agriculture, and you're in a greenhouse, you know, you don't need to go ask the Coastal Commission for permission to do anything. And so you could get away with a bunch of light pollution.
Gotcha.
It's the fact that we've got this new weird thing, and we're trying to do
Right.
regulation and get the Coastal Commission to sign off on it. So it's going to be tighter than regular agriculture.
I just say leave it out of the coastal zone.
It sounds like that's a good place to do it, though, you said. Why don't we just leave it in there, but say you got to keep it under wraps, you know, sundown to sun up?
Yeah, that's what I mean, don't allow light emission in the coastal zone.
It'd basically be the same as the indoor ordinance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that'd be tough, you probably aren't gonna get any applicants for that. That's what I'm saying, it's like, don't bother, you know, whatever. That's fine, I mean, I'm not gonna judge who can and can't make that work, I'm just saying, you know, that's what I mean, but, you know.
that was
Don't-
why one
don't
of the
fight
reasons,
coastal
one of the
commission.
things I was saying about, maybe there's a range of hours that, you know, the emission of some form of light is acceptable, you know, like from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m., for example, that gives somebody 18 hours
Not
to emit
the
light
coastal
where
commission, no.
it's not significantly interfering with the quote-unquote nighttime for people, you know what I mean?
Well, I don't know, the coastal commission doesn't care about hours, right? It's like any time of day.
Yeah, I don't think they would care.
Yeah, so it's. I don't
It's
think
not,
that-
it's not just people they're interested in
It's that
protecting
wildlife.
from, yeah. So
Well,
I don't know.
They care if you turn a light on at noon?
No, but they care if you do it at 6:30.
Well, yeah, well,
Right.
depending on the time of year.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah, but I'm saying, they care if you do it when it's dark. They don't care what time of day that happens to be.
Okay, very good. Yeah, so just comply, yeah, just do what the coastal commission says, even though shouldn't be here. And there's ag land that's not in the coastal zone.
For sure. Yeah.
So that's all I'm saying. Just because most of it's in the coastal zone doesn't mean that the small number of nurseries that may end up here can't find a place on the other side of the road. That's what I'm saying. Just set up there so you don't have to fight the coastal commission. It's better for business plan anyway.
Okay, so what size on ag land? On timberland, we said the
I don't see
same.
limiting it. I think it'd be a great way to, it'd be great to see a gigantic business like Walmart, Home Depot, Bud Depot. Yeah, I don't see a reason to limit that, really. I can't think of any reason.
The only reason to really limit it would be to make everybody feel good about it. If you put a
Yeah,
number
but
on it.
limiting jobs isn't a feel-good thing. Like, that's just,
You're gonna run up to the fact that most of the public isn't gonna know that a nursery is not gonna have the same impacts as cultivation.
just call it a nursery.
A cannabis nursery. You're just gonna have to deal with the fact that people aren't gonna know it's not gonna smell and know that it's not going to be a
Make it smell.
product that you can, steal and sell in the black market. If
So-
you just go in front of the board of supervisors and say unlimited nurseries.
If you want to start crunching numbers, think about, okay, so what have we allowed with outdoor licensing as far as square footages go on whatever parcels and sizes? And so, for example, if we just came away with 10,000 square foot on an ag forest, for example, with paved road, then we're okay with 20,000 square foot of production space on ag forest with paved roads because of the one-to-one space. So the minimum to start discussing in that scenario would be a 20,000 square foot nursery. Now maybe more is okay because it's not intensified and flowering. Maybe 40,000 square foot nursery in that scenario works. But clearly we're okay with a 20,000 square foot nursery because we're okay with that with that production space under those requirements in that zone. So that's the first thing to consider is what are our different sizes that we're already looking at in all the different zones, and that would dictate the nursery space right off the top as far as minimums go.
Big nurseries can smell. I should come clean about that. They just are, it's just way less, order of magnitudes less, but.
Is there going to be a need for odor filtration?
Well, not if I'm next to it, but I don't know. I think we just need a few and find out, and then find out later if we need odor filtration.
I think that's a great approach, but I think those few need to not be, 5
Yeah.
acres.
Shoot, I don't know.
Well, I guess that
I've
would
never
go,
been around a big nursery that wasn't already next to big flowering production places too. So I haven't
Well, it
experienced
also-
it in isolation.
also would be your setbacks. If you have a big nursery, you could have setbacks so that it wouldn't be close to somebody to smell it.
Sure. I suppose maybe just highway setbacks.
I don't know what a big nursery would smell like, but I used to do my shed and I do my laundry room as my little mom room, and there'd be a certain strain once in a while where it's premature and yet still kind of like, geez, I can smell what that
Yeah.
thing's going to smell like a little bit,
Right.
But it was most of them don't, and I never noticed any cannabis kind of smell in the room in general, unless I kind of rubbed the stock of them. But I guess if you had a huge place, maybe
You have acres of greenhouses and it gets hot, you could smell it probably.
So we need a little direction here, I think.
Yeah,
So Kurt,
Kurt was saying.
the logic you just laid out seemed to make sense.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
you guys kind of all want to start there
Yeah.
with,
Does the state have a definition or a size of nurseries?
No, they don't. It's one size fits all.
so Kurt, if you were stating a size for us to work around here, where would you start?
Well, I would start as minimums discussion points as the the doubling the size of all of these different places like I talked. And then, you know, I would probably think that maybe twice that is acceptable as far as impacts go for that particular business. It would be, I would think if you doubled the size of what these minimums
So,
are we were talking about, you probably still wouldn't get to the same impact at all as far as.
Let's talk it through then exactly. So unpaved road, 5,000 square feet?
In
Paved
ag
road,
forest is what
paved
we're talking
road up to
about.
40, or 20.
In ag forest, I think that's what we've got to, right? Yeah.
Wait a second. Are we talking about timberland, or are we talking about ag land? Are we talking about
Well,
both
everything's
at the
gonna,
same
I
time?
keep saying ag forest because that's it's gonna be called ag
Right.
forest if it's in timberland.
But it's a different land use designation, so it's different.
AF goes with timberland.
Right, so it's totally
Yeah.
different scale, and
So then you got to have,
I don't know, I don't think,
you got to consider just ag.
unlimited is not appropriate in timberland. I think we need to stick with the same limitations. That's what you were saying, right?
That's what we just said, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but you're
Sorry.
saying if you have 10,000 feet of cultivation space, you really have 20,000 feet.
Right.
And that should be a minimum talking point to start out with nursery in that particular zoning, in that, under all those same situations.
So
Sure.
20,000 square foot nursery, an AF.
And we can just bring that to ag land, I say,
Yes.
as a starting point, because timberland, we're acknowledging, allows for more nuisance creation than ag land. That's why we're only having outdoor production there. So in terms of nuisance creation, you should be, you know, the limiting of nurseries in the timberland is like from an environmental standpoint more. In the ag land, it's for nuisance, for ag, character of ag land, all the things we talked about, et cetera. And so, yeah, maybe an unlimited nursery doesn't make sense in terms of that in ag land, to just stop it at the 20,000 feet, same as in timberland.
Well, we came up with some type of non-indoor situation on ag land. It was, I don't know what exactly we were calling it, and it was in a structure, but it's not using an outdoor,
Not
or
emitted
not
by
an indoor,
5,000
quote-unquote,
square
license
feet,
from the
or
state.
2,500 square feet.
And I don't remember where we stopped with that, because that was like months ago now.
I think that was 2,500 square feet is where we capped indoor on ag land, 5,000 in manufacturing.
Yeah, that's right.
So that if you wanted to go larger, you don't flock to the ag
Well, we
land.
spent a bunch of meetings on going outdoor in ag land, so what are we saying that came to now?
We dropped that like a
Yeah,
hot rock.
We dropped that when the board expressed that was a no-go.
You can do outdoor if you're indoor.
Yeah, I still am down with that whole conundrum. But if we're saying that nursery is more appropriate to that outdoor in a structure situation, is it going to be required to be in a permitted structure, even if it's not going to be totally enclosed?
Permitted? Is that what you said? I think it has to be permitted.
Yeah, but, you know, is it going to be in a greenhouse, or is it going to be in a building?
Well, greenhouse is, they're really nice buildings. They're very expensive buildings, these greenhouses.
It's not, so the
They
indoor,
require building permits generally.
Right.
They require concrete. I mean,
the
they're
indoor
big-
ordinance requires a fully enclosed.
Right.
building. But we're not going to require that for nursery. That would be a real waste, right?
I think it'd be expensive and difficult to be a competitive nursery if you had those requirements. It would be just too much inputs.
Okay.
So you do need to be able to, you know,
Now,
Use
are
the
we
sun.
okay, or is it even a thing to do a nursery with plants in the ground, outside? Does that even make sense?
not really.
Okay.
I mean, you could put, like cutting stock plants in the ground. I mean, there could be you shouldn't be, I mean, you're talking about needing to prohibit that?
Yeah, well, do we need to address it? Are people going to try to do it at all? Or are we going to go to the Board of Supervisors and say it's going to happen in a greenhouse or a building?
It could, I mean, it would be somewhat rare, but I don't see the need to prohibit it. If somebody has built a nice greenhouse and there's earth on the bottom, You shouldn't be prevented from putting a plant in it. I don't know.
I mean outside of a greenhouse.
Oh, no, not outside.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I don't care if you use the dirt. I care if you're
Okay,
outside of
very
the
good.
greenhouse.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's a need to be just completely out in the open, naked.
You know, the same visual impact type stuff is going to need to apply.
Mhm.
People can't know that that's a huge cannabis greenhouse.
Mhm.
Other than that, what else needs to be? None of these things are going to create pollen, right? Does there need to be a
Well,
more
yes, you
frequent-
can. Your nurseries can do breeding projects, certainly, so.
So that we need a filtration system that's not going to interfere with nearby.
Yeah, the nursery has to have that to be in business. I mean, you would pollinate yourself. You couldn't,
Yeah.
if you're breeding and you have pollinating male plants.
No, I mean, not all nurseries would need to have pollen, but there's definitely a large scenarios where people
Sure.
will choose to do that because they'll be choosing to cross, try to
And
make new
they'll be
strains of plants.
isolating,
But
they'll
it's
be-
definitely would be at some nurseries, business models to solely be just propagating plants that are, either they acquire them from somebody else or they're doing them all themselves.
Yeah, they'd
You know.
protect themselves and their neighbors just as a business operation. You couldn't do a breeding program if your pollen was.
You know, to extrapolate this into a normal plant scenario, I mean, there are some nurseries out there that would solely just be creating cuttings and sending them off to other nurseries. So other nurseries could be rooting and growing the plant and then passing it along to the final grower per se. So it can be all different types of business models for the nursery, but definitely pollen could be one. Having pollen would definitely be one of those potentials.
Yeah, and for the hemp, for the same reason, for their own operation and for neighboring hemp programs, you need the filtration, the separation. So those would be indoor, really, a lot of that. To keep that done correctly, you'd have your breeding program in a truly indoor closed facility with lights, probably. So yeah, other than just, nurseries that are right on the highway could produce enough smell, maybe a big one, to where that might not be appropriate. I don't know, though. That might take some time, I guess, for people to be okay with.
Okay.
I mean, that'll come into like the plan, I would say, if you're talking about, a couple thousand square foot nursery, that'd be hard to bother anybody more than a couple 100 feet away, and if you're talking about, a 40,000 square foot nursery, then you're going to look at that permit differently.
So what are the bullet points or the tenets of this category of nursery that we're here to move forward?
Where it goes, the scale, and where it doesn't go, who's impacted. So the hemp program, like we're talking about pollen.
Location and size right now, that's it.
Hemp needs 300 feet minimum from other plants, whether they're pollinating or not. So if we want hemp in the ag land at some point, we need, that's a complicated thing, because the hemp, depending on what you're doing with it, if you're producing certified seed, then you need setbacks that are like larger than our entire ag community even has.
Well, is that something we want to accommodate? Is hemp the more viable industry?
Well, I don't know if people are going to be doing certified seed production programs. That's totally different, so there's seed production, there's all different levels of, there's seed that you're just producing for oil or for food or feed. That doesn't require a setback. If you're producing seed for production of a certified hemp, then you need these massive setbacks to ensure that you're not cross-pollinating with an unknown variety.
We need to
also
also
fiber
remember
production,
also
different.
that all this ag prime land is creating some of these setbacks on its own, because we can't do any of this cannabis businesses that we're talking about.
That's where the hemp's going to
in the
go.
Prime ag
ag
zonings.
That's where the hemp's
And
going
so
to go.
hemp is going to come at this from a different direction. Hemp is going to become something that's on the Farm Bill, that's on the California listing, that can be done in prime ag. And so that right there is creating And I don't
And
know how
within
many-
coastal,
And within coastal, because it'll come on the California Farm Bill and all that different, all that, whatever I'm saying.
Hemp on the beach.
Farm Bill, whatnot.
So,
That will come out in a different way, and I don't know what kind of buffers we're exactly talking about exactly on all these different scenarios, but that in itself creates massive buffers.
Yeah, we don't have the space for probably certified seed production here, but the other kinds of seed production, fiber production, and CBD extraction, I think will be what's going to be profitable for hemp farmers in the remaining years where it is profitable, is going to be in CBD extraction. And the California Hemp Program allows for that, although we don't have cultivars certified that are really for that yet. So it'll be some time, but
okay. So can we stick to nursery right now?
yeah, hemp's also on the agenda and they interact, so that's why we're talking about it.
Yeah, I just
So-
want to know if there's something we need to do to a nursery
To
protect
accommodate for hemp.
Yeah,
Right.
and it sounds like not really, except if they're going to be pollinating, they're going to need
Yeah.
to filter that air automatically, because that's just going to be necessary.
And then the California Hemp Program has, I think they have 300 feet from any cannabis plant, whatever you're doing with the hemp.
300 feet.
Yeah, let me check.
That's not too hard.
Okay. so
What do we
that's-
think about manufacturing? You know, we're allowing 5,000 square foot indoor grows in manufacturing zones. Is there any reason why we can't allow a 5,000 square foot or bigger nursery in a manufacturing zone?
Sure, yeah, that's, cultivation, nursery.
Should it be limited to 5,000 feet? Should it be indoor? I mean, I think it should probably be only indoor, otherwise it's not really a manufacturing use. You need those,
Yeah, I agree.
that kind of intense lighting to make it make sense.
Yeah. You should be able to, like, if you were, like what we're allowing with other indoor, if you have the means to let the sun in and let no light out at any time of the day, you should be able to do that. But yeah, no, I think that might be a good place to not limit nurseries.
So when I was talking earlier, I've kind of come to the conclusion of some of the idiocy of what the board is proposing here, but 10,000 square, we talked about something like, what were we, 10,000 square foot in ag forest was one of the first things I said. In these ag zonings, these zonings that are off of the timberland, that have access to resources in a much easier capacity, a nursery there would easily be able to sustain a much larger nursery than in ag forest zonings, for example. You know, access to water and infrastructure is much more prevalent. So, you know, if you're talking about a minimum in a different zoning than ag forest, I would say it should be much larger than that.
It's just, I think that at a certain point, the smell could become an issue to consider from a large nursery in ag land. I think that's the only one I could think of.
Certainly, we could see like a future where the community's now used to seeing cannabis out in the open, because we're talking about hemp, you know, so we're seeing pot plants, you know, grown robustly in large fields, you know. And I would say that the nursery side we're on here is probably more imminent, you know. I mean, someone, you know, is going for these licenses first, you know. But I don't see a reason to cap the nursery in size. You know, I mean, if we're already requiring that you can't tell that there's cannabis in there, and we've accepted, though, that the future does accept this now. So, so in a few years, you know, we're seeing hemp fields, you know.
Yeah, you know, like Blake, where your land is, and where our land is, and where Rob's land is, or Kurt's, nobody'd ever know. I mean, we're so far away, we're on ag land. We have greenhouses already over there. You guys have
Big buildings.
Yeah, big buildings. You've got your chicken huts. You've got everything. If you put up a greenhouse, nobody's going to ever know that it's a nursery.
So just limit the impacts, don't limit the scale. Don't limit the size, limit the nuisance creation.
Yeah, so how do you limit the odor on something that's in a greenhouse?
With space,
The setbacks?
setbacks,
Yeah, but,
or
you know, if
you could filter the air, although I think it would be a little expensive.
If we're talking about something much larger than 20, right? Like, we're talking about an acre. What kind of setback do you need to prevent an acre greenhouse or an acre of nursery?
500,000 feet.
Or you just go with the idea that we don't admit odor, offensive odor, and if there's a complaint, then it gets dealt with. If there is no complaint, and in other words, no neighbor in really close proximity, then it worked.
State highway might be your thing, you know, that might be your,
1,000 feet from a highway?
I don't know about the number, but the state highway may be the point from which you're trying to keep it away rather than other ag neighbors, but.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with.
We're talking big, we're getting carried away, and it's gonna be a long, long time before anybody's setting up an acre nursery here, I think, so.
It's just, you know, selling it.
Yeah, gotcha.
It's just selling
Okay.
it. You know, if we just say in the ordinance, you know, can't emit offensive odor, and leave it at that, I'm fine with that. Heidi's gonna be the one that's then getting complaints, right?
Sure.
She's over here pulling her hair out.
You know, Heidi might want more protection, and also the board might want to be able to tell the public there's more protection than if we get a complaint, we're going to shut it down, since we have, you know, the one code enforcement officer.
Right.
But, you know, I don't have a problem. If you say no offensive odors, then people will choose, you know.
Right. I mean, just given like the pace of growth of things, I think it's okay to have a little bit of the limit. The limits that we're talking about, I think, are large enough not to discourage business from getting started. They can see a pathway.
Yep.
You know, if you go too small, then people are like, forget it, there's no hope of growing. But I think if we're talking 10 or 20,000 square feet, I think that allows people plenty of room to get going. And then just like any cannabis business, they're weighing, you know, how the community feels and what they think and how they vote, and that's how you determine the long-term viability of your business. You know, so
We got to remember also that we have a naturally limiting factor here on a nursery, right? We are the most northern point in the state, and for example, if you were a nursery and was trying to conduct business by supplying growers that were outside of this county with, you know, vegetatively growing plants, I mean, you're at a disadvantage, period, because you are going to have the farthest shipping point to anybody else in the state of California. You can't go out of the state of California to move the product. It only has one way to exit. It has to go down Highway 101 and through other places. And so, you know, for example, if you had a customer in Humboldt County, you're going to be competing with maybe a nursery that's actually in Humboldt County, and so you have an extra cost on top of that. So these nurseries are going to be mostly limited by the local people that would be potentially using the product, and then viability, what's your viable nature of getting it out of here?
Sure.
You know, and how far can you really get it before the cost goes
true.
And
too high?
Just to be clear, you guys are both saying that you think, in general, that's going to limit this nursery size and scope forever and ever?
No, just
a tick.
It will limit it forever and ever, but the limitation, I think, will become more and more negligible.
Yeah, the limitation will probably reduce over the years. However, the biggest thing that could affect that is if it was able to cross state boundaries. If you're able to move the product across state boundaries,
then it
opens up a lot.
Then it opens up a lot of scenarios for our community personally, because our community is much more easily accessed. We much more easily access shipping-wise all the way through. We can ship to Oregon everywhere we want to, as opposed to even getting
I don't know if it
to
applies
San Francisco,
to,
let's say. We're closer to
Yeah.
everywhere in Oregon than we are to the
Yeah.
Bay Area, basically.
We're a good, clean county for exporting plants too. I don't know if it applies to cannabis, but like other counties can't export plants around because of the
Right.
diseases and things. So as the whole industry develops, this transportation thing won't be an issue. You'll have distributors and transporters coming to Del Norte from the city or from Humboldt, and then backhauling whatever product and plants back the other way. So it'll be a system that will work.
So what are we landing on? 20,000? Bigger? What's the result here?
I think we're at 20 right now, unless I hear
Can we start there?
direction.
Kurt?
Yeah, we did.
We did start there, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's it.
That was a yes, a real firm yes.
Okay.
Medium, yes.
Okay, in general on nurseries, the location we're kind of, we've got them in manufacturing zones, I guess forestry. Am I missing some stuff?
Is it forestry too, TPC?
Yeah, maybe it should be.
What?
Whatever Joel needs there. Forestry, TPC.
What are we talking about?
Where
No,
these nurseries could
not TPC.
potentially
Oh, not
land.
TPZ.
Not TPZ. We
Yeah,
just do
nothing's
AF.
TPZ. AF.
If we did A, AF, and AI,
AI.
and manufacturing.
Wait, I thought ag general. Oh, not AE.
Yeah, not
Okay,
AE.
got it.
Not AE.
Okay.
If we're not emitting a smell,
Manufacturing.
why not C4? A little bit different than the cultivation.
Okay, right, C4. Is manufacturing in C4, but not cultivation? There was some conflict is why we didn't
Yeah, I
have
don't think we
cultivation.
allowed
No, we
manufacturing in C4.
No.
I think we kept it out.
Why not C4 for nursery indoor?
It's pretty far afield from,
I remember not, there was no in,
I mean, to some extent, I mean, if there are other zones that are better fitting, I mean, because there's other type of commercial activities that you'd like to have some zoning available for them.
yeah.
You know, that may not fit into an A zone.
Yeah, I
I
just,
mean, we don't have a lot of commercial, I guess is what I'm saying.
yeah, it doesn't seem particularly consistent, and you don't want to displace other things, and it's not really necessary,
oh, not a cannabis exhibit.
unless we come back in a year and the only places to do it are C4, and everybody's clamoring for it, but AF, AI, M. I think that's a lot of space.
That's my friend who wants to do, he doesn't want to do this.
That's Russell and Low Divide.
So
Yeah.
Is that TPZ or is that
It would all have to be A, everything has to get rezoned.
There is like, AF doesn't really exist right now for the most part.
so anything that's TPZ right now?
Well, it'd have to be
No,
rezoned.
PO, a lot of PO would go to AF, that's the plan.
Well,
Not
TPZ would too, if you want to use your TPZ to grow.
TPZ would
Yeah, that
go
would
too,
be-
but there's
You have to go through the rezone process.
process.
and
Yes,
the-
that's correct.
That's why we keep saying TBZ or timberland, because essentially we're talking about timberland, but ultimately it's going to be, it's a requirement that we're going to have to rezone it. And so to say AF at the moment, you're talking about like a few parcels that, yeah.
Well,
That was clear.
yeah,
So, okay, so, yeah, I remember not having cultivation in C4. I thought that we did have manufacturing in C4 for some reason. Why was I thinking
I
that?
think we talked about it, but I think where we landed was not. But Heidi, can you remember?
Sorry, what was the question?
Did we end up doing manufacturing in C4?
Yeah, I think we did.
I
Yeah,
believe
think
that we did.
manufacturing. We didn't do cultivation
No
in
cultivation
C4.
in
We
C4.
we left cultivation
There you
in M.
Right, and then no manufacturing in C3, but C3 does
correct.
allow retail.
Yeah.
That's correct.
If we're taking care of odor mitigation, and I think we all agree it's at least 95% less odor, I don't know what would be wrong with C4. I know we have a concern that we have a limited amount of commercial space, and certainly if you exclude the city, it might seem that way, but
There was something about plants and farming or something that made it so that what didn't work in the C4, the cultivation. There was some legal logic.
Yeah, I remember that specifically. There was a conflict, I thought, with the general plan. It's talking about how you used commercial property and then.
'Cause it was
these
like
plants,
you-
but
the
maybe I'm
C4
wrong.
First
allows
you were trying-
manufacturing.
We were trying to decide originally if you could even do cultivation in manufacturing, and then decided, okay, that is okay, but not, it wasn't going to jive in C4, but I don't remember why from a policy standpoint.
If you were growing vegetables, could you do it in a C4 in any building? You know, water, moisture, soil?
I don't know, is any agriculture, even with the use permit, allowed in a C4?
Are we calling cannabis agriculture?
I can't,
I didn't use the
We're
word
calling it
agriculture, I
manufacturing.
just
I
said
don't
not
recall.
vegetables.
I don't think
gardening.
so.
You don't think
It
so?
seemed to me that, now this has, are we talking about the cultivation or are we talking about manufacturing?
Talking about nursery.
Cultivation.
Nursery, okay,
Well,
but back to the other, I mean, I think the reason why the manufacturing had more explanation for things that were noxious. I don't know, maybe
Okay.
I'm just getting things confused, this is.
Okay, so then let's
really
just,
cold in here.
let's just go look at C4 again later,
Vote with
Heidi, and we'll make another.
I think it just didn't jive with like the commercial nature of C4.
Well, C4 allows a lot of manufacturing.
Does it? It is the same. It's very similar.
Yeah, it
the
allows
list of
light
uses.
industrial.
But
We'll have to look at that one, but I don't see, like, just from a common sense perspective, a small nursery seems like it would fit in the same kind of place where you would allow manufacturing. I don't really see the conflict. And then as far as limitations in manufacturing, that's probably a good place to not have limitations if allows somebody to go as large as they want in manufacturing in a nursery, right?
So the 20,000 doesn't apply in M zone, is what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
How does everybody feel about that?
Somebody wanted to.
So, yeah, you guys are jumping pretty fast here. I'm back to the C4 and cultivation of vegetables or anything. And if we said no cultivation at one point, then I believe that nurseries, when you plant cultivars in the soil, you're now cultivating. And so I just kind of hung up right there.
Heidi and I will go back and look, because if the reason C4 was off limits was the smell, and that might not be an issue, then maybe C4 can be. But I think, I remember at least Heidi and I talking about the limited availability of our commercial land as being a pretty big factor there.
Okay, yeah.
We'll
Can limit it from that.
look at it.
I would think
We'll
that,
look at it.
you know, maybe from the county's perspective, but from the community's perspective, I would think that they would have a perspective that the community's not utilizing their commercial spaces. I mean, I myself, when I went to, it was more of a city deal though, but I went to the city council meeting and made a diagram of just, all the vacant, ugly places, Ray's, when they were blacked out on the sign, and I mean, it was dozens, and it's ugly, but that's mostly the city, so, I had a hard time finding many vacancies on the outside of the city, but.
Yeah. Well, actually, Robert, I agree with you. I think it's a good point and a decent argument.
What is the status of the cities? I'm sorry.
I don't know.
Does anyone know?
They're waiting for the county.
If this,
Kidding?
if this is a way to rejuvenate some old dinosaur buildings, then maybe, I'm willing to consider it. I just need to understand it better.
I just want to see the biggest opportunity,
Yeah,
that's possible.
it's so hard to
We've
find
already heard,
spaces to rent or even to purchase that things are getting harder all the time, and we really need to start looking at ways to, just from a standard, commerce perspective, county governments find ways to invite business and create an inviting business environment, and we need to start doing that now rather than the opposite.
Yeah,
We're used
I
to
hear
it.
you. All right.
So M zones, limitations, I don't know, unless we're trying to preserve M zones for other things, but the large M parcels, which are like the old mill sites, that could accommodate something larger than 10,000 square feet anyway, these are going to be sites that are over an acre. There's not very many M zone sites over an acre. And these are sites that need to be used. So I think M is a good place for somebody to consider if they wanted to be ambitious and set up a big facility for a nursery, they should be allowed to.
I think we're all on board with M zone for sure.
Okay, and C4, you guys can figure out why it was that we didn't have cultivation there to begin with.
Yeah, let Heidi and I poke around the
Okay.
general plan in C4 and see, maybe it's not a big deal at all.
Okay, very good. And then size, we are at 20,000 or less at this point? Up to 20?
Up to 20, except for in M zones.
And then setbacks. Setbacks from
No limit in M zones.
from what? Or you just accomplish that with, no nasty odor admission or whatever.
Yeah, I think the state highway probably should have something. We have 200 feet for our timberland stuff. It seems like we could do something like that for state highways.
And a nursery.
It's a good selling point.
It could be in a building, or it could also be out on
Wouldn't be
fabric in
out-
a yard?
No, they're going to be like in the minimum would be in a greenhouse that might open up, like where the sides might roll up on a hot day. So that's more weather dependent, but it's never going to just be living outside all the time because it's too cold at night and you need a little security, you know, although you're not producing the hot black market product, you know, that flower production.
And for the most part, and generally speaking, they won't be in buildings.
Would not be in buildings.
I mean, they can be, but financially, the cost goes way up.
Greenhouses, you mean, not in buildings, but in greenhouses?
No, like in buildings, like indoor growing, like we have permitted on the M zone.
Right.
We permitted indoor, essentially indoor growing.
So you don't see nurseries developing in that?
Nurseries will mostly develop in a greenhouse scenario.
Yeah.
I mean, it's financially speaking.
You'll have both.
You can do them any way you want,
but
it's the margin is going to push them towards mostly all.
You need buildings for your security and for your people and your stuff, you know, and your propagation area is going to be like in a temp controlled building, probably using lights, you know, so you're going to be using both. You're not just going to be in tarpaulin structures all the time, you know. You got to have a building probably. But,
okay, we've got whatever 17, 18 minutes left. What is our goal? Do we want to come to some conclusion here on nursery real quickly? Do we want to put it off till the next meeting?
I think we're getting good. We're getting close. What else we got? What are we hung up on?
Setbacks is the only.
200 feet on the highway is a good place to start from. We're doing that with other stuff.
200-foot highway.
State highways.
State.
Let me say on setbacks that you could probably go in two different directions with setbacks, and maybe you would have two different types of setbacks, because you could have if there was ventilation or filtration with your nursery, then maybe your setback would be less, right? And then if you had no filtration with your nursery scenario, then you'd have a different setback, right? Because why would we need to push somebody way out, you know, and away from everything if they were going to have a full-on ventilation and mitigation system, just like we are already, like we have smaller setbacks for indoor and whatnot.
Yeah, this would apply for where we're not meeting the indoor requirements.
Earlier, we had talked about, you know, the odor emission being, you know, if somebody files a complaint against it, that you've got too much. So we could go with that scenario and as opposed to putting setbacks with when you know, I don't know.
I think
the
setback for this is mostly going to be about visual impacts, right?
Right.
So 200 feet from a county highway or state highway makes sense.
Yeah, when you're not in a building, you know, if you're in an indoor structure like Kurt's saying, then that can be the same kind of thing as our regular indoor regulation, but we're not going to see a lot of that. You're going to be in a greenhouse that's going to open and close, and that's what I'm saying, a little bit of a setback, and you're probably realistically, you're not going to get a permit within 200 feet of the, or even within 300 feet of the state highway. More realistically, there's going to be some other things going on that are going to be asked to be farther away or whatever. That's my guess, looking at the board and the commission. You know, so.
Okay.
I think works.
Okay.
I think works.
Anything else we need to add under the category of setbacks?
We have 50 feet from other stuff for our other ordinance.
Neighbors now?
County roads, neighboring parcels, etc. That sounds reasonable. It's just like, you know, it's not much more than a lot of building setbacks. So.
1,000 feet from parks and stuff still apply?
I think so, yeah. That's going to be in the state rules. 600 feet is going to be in the state rule. Although I heard you were saying they moved that to 1,000 feet for.
So we had 1,000 for national and state?
Yeah.
Parks? 1,000. Parks, not state and national parks.
And county parks? I think so far it's been county parks as well.
Even
what's in the ordinance now?
County parks? Can't be 1,000 feet. Seriously?
Three.
Camp is probably the one that's going to be.
Or like kids, like with the retail, the kids facilities, places that have playground equipment. That triggered the state setback requirement for all license types.
Well, that's different. That's different than what she's mentioning though, right?
Okay.
From my recollection, like those are parks like you're talking about. She's talking about like there's like 3 state parks, like county parks, I mean.
Like, you know, county campground type.
They're like, it's like a campground essentially, all
Uh-oh.
3 of them are.
What, why do we have to stay away from those?
Same reason as state parks. What's the difference? These are,
Because those are rules come down from the state. That's why.
why?
So we should be
Why what?
adding county parks to everything in addition.
So far in the ordinance, it is, county park is included for both the retail manufacturing and the indoor cultivation. And, yeah.
I remember that was because of the playground stuff. That was what defined it as a facility for use by children. That's how the state definition, that's how they trigger their setbacks. It's schools and any place that has equipment for kids, basically. And places that have video games, more than 10 video games is a kid's place. You know, you have to stay away from those. Thought that was the reason.
I thought it was for smell, to keep smell away from
Oh, I don't know.
recreational and tourist activities.
Sweet.
That was the different part of what Jesse's talking about.
It was a kids thing.
That's
It
the
was-
kids part of the state
Yeah.
regulations, about how it can't be by schools and everything. It was included in that
Yeah,
part, but that's different than this.
Yeah, I don't care that much about kids.
In that way.
Joel has kids. Don't tell his kids he said that. Okay, I get it.
Because they're immune to odors.
Yeah, they don't care. Care about tourists with dollars to spend.
Okay, in summary, the where, location-wise, we've decided all that, manufacturing, ag, AF, and AI, and then the C4 is up to Joel and Heidi to kind of report back. Size of 20,000 or less. Setbacks, 200 feet on highways, state highways, and the 50 feet on neighbors and roads and whatever else. I really didn't capture all that last conversation. Am I missing a bullet point?
No, it doesn't.
No.
So everyone kind of in agreement with that as we see it today, or would you want to argue?
As far as for manufacturing, do we have a 50, we don't have any boundaries or any setbacks other than the, you know, the juvenile kind of related ones, right?
I don't
Correct.
remember.
Yeah.
So for manufacturing, we're going to stick with that, right?
There aren't property line setbacks because you can build buildings right up to the property line, so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, basically, we're just kind of keeping this consistent with
Yeah,
what we've already
we're
been
trying
doing.
to.
Yeah.
That would be wise. Okay. Any other, I don't know, areas of concern that we should throw under this nursery category, or? Okay, we're going to move on. Hemp is kind of on hold until what? Or do we need to deal with it? I'm a little confused on that, because we're
It's fun
thinking.
to talk about. We got a few minutes.
Yeah, we're thinking that something will develop. You know, I'm going to be at a State Farm Bureau meeting here in like 2 weeks in San Diego, and I think that that'll probably be a subject. I really don't know for sure, but I'll certainly ask and find out, and we'll see where it's going. And then the National Farm Bureau is dealing with it on in January.
Yeah, we need the ag, we need Justin here to get into it.
Okay.
What did
detail,
you want to
yeah.
really get into? Because it seems like as long as we're not doing a cannabis ordinance that we think, you know, has foreseeable negative impacts on hemp,
Yeah, that's
we don't have to
it.
do anything to hemp directly.
So
That's it. That's why I just didn't want the things that we're permitting to then
yeah,
get in
that.
place and then
And then chase out.
interfere with hemp
I would,
coming in
I would be,
later.
I would personally, you know, speaking from a perspective on that, I would be a lot less, I'm a lot less concerned with the cannabis regulations that the county is making, interfering with hemp, as I am with private property owners and their ability to grow 6 plants interfering with hemp. Now, that's probably where the most problem is going to come in, is with private property owners and their ability to grow 6 plants, which is now basically granted to them by means of the state. And and both of those probably make very negligible impacts on the ability to grow hemp in this county. I mean,
That's why we're not going to be producing.
we have massive
certified seed.
setbacks through ag prime that can be used
Yeah.
to grow hemp if we choose to, and these facilities that we're talking about permitting are going to have a lot of stringent requirements and can always be tightened if they needed to be.
And Kurt, just to be clear, your concern and your point is that 6 plants on a neighbor that you can't regulate them from not doing is going to potentially send pollen over to a hemp farm.
It could.
And what's the safe zone distance on that? We don't really know.
It just
right?
depends on how the wind blows, but I mean, you're talking hundreds of feet or thousands of feet, but then there are regulations that that are being put in place that you have to have these types of buffers.
Yeah,
no
for the
matter
hemp
what,
grower.
for certain types of hemp growing, like the
Yeah.
seed production, for example.
Yeah.
That was one of the
Yeah.
that was one of the hot things that was a potential for this county, was the actual seed production.
Yeah,
And
I get you.
And so I don't think that these commercial operations that we're talking about will affect that, based upon where they're going to be located and the setbacks that they could have from potential ag prime locations. Because where the use of hemp is going to come in is when the federal farm bill allows it. That's where it's going to become the most financially viable for the local community, for the local economy, the local producer, is when it becomes more widespread and accessible.
So far what they have is just the minimum isolation is 330 feet. There shall not be any cannabis sativa plants within 330 feet of the inspected crop. So you got to be able to control the land around you 330 feet in order to get approval from the ag department. You can't have neighbors, I think, basically.
Sure.
Exactly, right.
That's actually much closer than I would have thought.
Yeah, me too.
Well,
That was
Sure.
that was an upwind buffer.
Certain certifications will almost certainly require.
Well, that's just any plant, whether it's
Yeah.
producing pollen or anything, like any plant.
And the problem then becomes contamination of your crop and the testing that will be required and all of that jazz.
Yeah,
You know,
sure.
hence the buffers. So.
Sure.
And then if you're doing the
Yeah,
certified, it's 16,000 feet. If you're doing, inspected crop certified seed for production of known variety.
we just at the dairy and at our poultry deal, we do a lot of testing for GMOs and in our organic feeds, right? Which GMOs are illegal in organics, but yet there's a tolerance of sometimes up to 1.25% because there's just contaminants out there. And it's not because the corn crop we buy from wherever was next to a farm. It's now in the seed. It starts out in the seed at, say, 0.8 contamination, and then it comes out of the field at, 1. So it's not necessarily, anyhow, it's in the system.
There's a contamination threshold.
Non-GMO certified allows up to 1.25% on some crops.
All those contamination thresholds
Yeah,
Yeah.
not more than 4 plants per acre of harmful contaminants.
So, okay.
So that's really all I see. Other than,
5 minutes to go.
um,
Yeah, what, next meeting, somewhere in 2024, 25, what are we thinking? The year 2024.
Are we going dark?
We're going dark.
Oh, did we want to come up with questions for the building people other than, I had just sent some on the fly last night to Heidi, and I
So you're talking
forget what
planning
they
or
were.
building
That's
department?
the building guys, I was just thinking about, I don't know if this is relevant for the group or not, really.
I can't remember what you wanted to ask him.
And I'm looking it up,
I
can't remember.
don't have any questions for him.
Jesse, maybe between now and the next meeting,
Okay.
hopefully sooner than later,
Right.
we can schedule for you to come in and meet with Dave, and we
Okay.
can kind of talk about it.
Right. So I was thinking about is there's these plastic temporary structures that, so it just kind of get an idea of what flies, what you can permit and what you can't. And it might help to find out you know, kind of what scale is appropriate for, in terms of development. I was just sort of had this fantasy that maybe the building department could help applicants figure out how to do things rather than just this trial and error thing where you come with your plan and they say, nope, that's not going to work, and then you try again and again and again, rather than having somebody working backwards, you know, like knowing what they know and saying, well,
Yeah.
given everything that we know, this is, you know, what you're going to be able to get away with, you know. So that was sort of what I was thinking, but I don't know.
Do you want help developing those questions, or do you want to just keep working
Well, if
on
you
it?
guys are interested in it, I thought about generators and extension cords are pretty widely used. Is there going to be a way to allow that, or is this all going to have to be like permanently mounted, permitted, you know, electrical installations with 18-inch trenching just to fire up a generator to use, you know, for a temporary use? Like those kinds of things would be good to know, because if
Well, are those things required generally?
I have no idea.
I don't know anything about that stuff.
Well, you wanted to have a building department versus
I'm going to get as much out of this as I can for my own personal interest,
I see.
just to be clear.
You're digging deep here.
Okay, and then when you permit structures that accommodate employees, are we talking about different considerations? You know, when you're talking about commercial stuff and employee considerations versus not. I'm just looking at this email I read last night. And those are the kinds of things. And then the kind of a bigger idea of bringing existing farms into compliance. We didn't get into that a lot. I think council was leery about creating entitlement or vested rights to existing non-conforming uses before we had an ordinance. And
Well, the existing non-conforming use has to start out legal and then become illegal.
sure, that's what I'm saying.
that
So
doesn't
granting, you know, temporary permission to something, you know, there was a worry that can create that, when there was a question of how to get in on the temporary licensing program that happened earlier in the year. Seemed like county didn't want to get involved in that. But now that we do have an ordinance, it's not realistic to expect these farms to get with it and be completely code compliant in all the ways. You can't break any rules, you know, like we were saying, you can't just start doing things. Everything has to be approved and done exactly like no other business, you know. You just do things and get away with them until it's an issue, and then you're given some time to come into compliance. So we're not going to have any of that.
So Jesse, the question is, yeah, do you get a grace period or a grandfathering period?
Yeah, so
or
is that
something?
going to be a discussion or not? That was the other point, so. How to do that.
I don't think we should
I think
whatever,
that,
legislate that.
That's
yeah,
politics.
That,
Yeah,
that's
sure.
going to be probably, you know, in general, in the universe, enforcement issues are discretionary.
Depends on how.
This has code enforcement, it's got law enforcement, it's got now the tax collector. There's a lot of people that can enforce, and I plan to deal with that with them in kind of a task force.
That misses the point entirely when it comes to trying to bring businesses into the fold, but we can talk about it later from a political standpoint.
We're ready to
Yeah.
wrap up here at 11:59, talking about next meeting, potentially. I'm certainly open on December 17th, if that's a Monday, if anyone has interest. That's a no. So push until January? What are we thinking?
Yeah, I mean, if we just take a little extra time, I might be able to have something totally drafted by a January meeting.
Okay, so,
7th to 14th is a Monday.
yeah, I'm in New Orleans for that National Farm Bureau.
Do we want to try to meet before Christmas?
Well, that was the 17th I was proposing, but that would
But
be
nobody
without
can
Joel.
make it, and so then we're talking about January. But are we going to meet before that, like next week, or just wait till January? Those are kind of our options, right?
I think we're waiting.
Well, Joel needs some time to get things prepared for us to look at.
Say yes, Joel.
Okay, well, if we don't need to meet next week, then is that what we're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
We're looking for January.
Good job.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we have that many open questions that,
Not on the 7th.
like, they'll become clearer when when the drafting happens, and then we can come back and find the holes, and that's just gonna, you know,
So,
my time is more valuable in my office than it is here.
okay.
Got it.
So January 7th is an option if y'all want to do that, or we wait till the 21st.
The 7th is fine with me.
Okay. And does it matter if we do 10 o'clock or 2 o'clock, or does anyone?
Doesn't matter to me right now.
On Mondays, yeah, Mondays mornings are better for me.
Okay, we'll stick with 10 o'clock then. Thanks, Aaron.
What's the date we got?
January 7th.
January 7th, not December 7th. So 6 weeks,
Yeah.
7 weeks away. Well, you guys are lazy.
That's starting to settle in on you.
It is. It is hard.
I'm out of here. I'm going to Humboldt. You guys are lame.
You get Christmas off.
We still love you.
I'm gonna go somewhere where I already got this figured out. I can just apply for my permit right now. Yes, they do. Okay.
And I'm writing it down. So January 7th. January 7th, 10 o'clock will be our next meeting, most likely. And with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.